Hi all, I've taken you through a few videos now, so we've covered the interior common issues, electrical common issues, engine, gearbox common issues, drivetrain common issues. We've done front suspension common issues. I might go over that because that was an early video and I didn't really like it. The rear suspension, I wasn't thorough with that video. The rear suspension I covered. Bodywork in general, I haven't really covered that as such, and we've covered the exhaust system in another video that may or may not have come out depending on when I decide to put this one out. Things are a bit of a jumble on the channel. I'm trying to fit another video in alongside my Beatrix work. Now I've got a space of a few hours, I'm not doing anything, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you all the little things that you need to look for every time you open the bonnet. So if you open the bonnet to check your fluid, yeah, you check your oil, you know, you do a coolant check, but what other things can you check other than that while you're at it, and something that won't take, you know, a million years to do? Well, easy. There are quite a few areas that I would just keep an eye on while you've got the bonnet open, and literally it takes about 5 minutes. Now, one of the major things that I've never mentioned so far, and something that I've used every time you have to open the bonnet, is the actual key in the lock there, instead of a normal cable that everybody else used. Ford were like, no, I think it's quite fancy to have a pop-up badge and put your key in directly. I think it's a cool feature. I think it is one of those wacky little features that sets this car apart from every other car from the time. Even the Mark II Focus carried it on, but they ditched it for the Mark III because they just thought it was too much of a pain in the ass. And I do hope, yes, it's bird poo again. I do worry when I see white stuff on the bonnet that I've got another chip somewhere. But the main problem with these is that if you do not open the bonnet regularly enough, if you don't lubricate this, you might find that when you put your key in and turn, it might just snap the lock. The barrel might not move, it might just snap from the actual release mechanism. So you've got the barrel here, and then that operates an arm which basically flicks the actual catch up. So basically the first turn of the key is you put it in, you turn it left, and that releases the catch. That movement has basically released that arm, so the whole barrel turns and it releases that arm. Then to release it again, you've got to turn it to the second point, and then as you're turning it to the second point, lift. Okay, so it does require two hands to do that. Now the issue with this is that if this bonnet has not been opened in a long time, which is a concerning factor. I think if I was buying a Mark I now, okay, the first thing I would check out is, does that bonnet latch open or is it really stiff? That is not a good sign that the car has been looked after. If I can get in there as easy as mine, it means it has been looked after. Someone's stuck their head under the bonnet and actually done some checks or some work. There has been work done on this car. It has been more looked after. So that's the first classic sign for me of a Mark I that has not been looked after. Aside from rust and issues that you can obviously see on the outside, that is a telltale sign. And the first time I bought this car, even though this car had been maintained from new with lots of service stamps from new every single year, the bonnet was a bit stiff. In fact, it was so stiff I was worried that I'd actually broken the lock. And that is a massive failure point of these cars, where the locks can break. Now the reason that my lock hasn't broken is simply because it's used. I regularly open this bonnet once a week or so to check especially the engine oil. Like I said about the engine oil, check the levels. Even though I know mine doesn't burn, that doesn't mean it isn't going to start burning it. If you start turning your eye away from these things and assuming things, your car's going to give you some nasty surprises, especially cars this age. Now, I can't really show you too much without actually taking this air deflector off. But basically, you've got this shaft that turns into the latch itself. So if I just put the key in, you can see it moving, right? I'm turning it to the first position. This is what you do to release the whole mechanism. And now you can see, can you see it? Oh, no, you can't. Oh, yeah, there you go. Can you see down there? It's just moving away, and that's what releases the latch, okay? That's what releases the latch, and the latch will jump up, okay? And then the second movement is this. So you turn it to the second position, and that's what's going on, okay? And it just fully releases while you get your second hand and pull the bonnet up, okay? Now, my recommendation, this shaft is known to break away from the lock, and the reason is it's just been not opened enough, it's not been lubricated. I would suggest you have a day where you take this scuttle panel off, just take these clips out, okay? I've got the 2-litre air deflector on mine. Yours will just have a normal snorkel, and this will just go around. You won't have this bit. This simply takes air from this point only and takes it up and through. The normal snorkel, air goes in here at a higher point. I think the reason being they only fitted them to the 2-litre automatics is just to get that extra bit of power through cooler, denser air, and that's really important. But you just take that off and you expose the mechanism, and just spend a day with some wet wipes or dry, I don't care what it is, as long as you've got something to clean that up. GT85 please, no WD-40. Do not squirt WD-40 in that. It's a big no-no. You will end, what happens with WD-40 in any form of a lock is, because it's oil based, it will stick there, and dirt, I'm not joking, what you do, you put your keys in your pocket, don't you? And your keys, I'm not joking you, I know it sounds stupid, but your keys have dirt on it, okay? Your keys go in your pocket, you drop your keys on the floor, you get all sorts of dirt on this. And what you're doing is you're transferring that dirt into that lock bit by bit by bit. And what you'll find is after a year or two of doing that, your lock will have gummed up, because that dirt is basically going to stick to the oily residue of the WD-40 that's left in the lock. Yes, it's a very well lubricated lock. WD-40 will lubricate the lock, but it's not going to help long term. That's why a lot of door lock manufacturers will basically say you void the warranty on any form of locks, whether it's house locks, window locks, anything like that, if you use WD-40 or there's evidence you've used it. Use GT85, squirt it straight into the lock. Do it regularly. I squirt it in probably once every 6 months just to keep it supple, because I know mine is nice and clean. Get some GT85 in here, clean all around there, and there is absolutely no issues with that. I've never had a problem. There are repair kits for these if they do break. I have heard of people who say, well, if it breaks and you can't open it with the key, get a screwdriver in, and that is correct. You get a long bladed screwdriver, flat bladed screwdriver, stick it in, and you will find it hits the tab straight into the actual latch, and it will open the latch as a temporary measure. But you need a new lock. I'd preferably get a second hand lock and latch with a key, okay? The barrel is obviously matched to the key, so as long as that car still has a key and the key can come with a new lock, fantastic. Although you'll have 2 keys instead of 1. Hey-o, welcome to the world of classic cars, where people have 1 key for every door because they've changed all the locks. Right, on to the actual engine bay stuff. Now, to be honest with you, immediately just check the oil, okay? This, as I said before, this O-ring, oh God, is stiff. Just give it a twist, okay? Just put some silicone on that ring so it doesn't stick as much. There we go, it's coming out nicely. But just give it a twist. Don't do that, it will snap, okay? Believe you me, these handles will just snap, okay? Obviously, if you've got automatic transmission, you have to check that when the engine is actually running and put it through all the gears. As far as anything else is concerned, coolant bottle. Make sure you just have a general look at the coolant bottle, because I've known some of them to crack. The original ones, I've replaced mine with a newer one as preventative maintenance. The aftermarket ones are perfectly fine. This is an aftermarket one. Make sure you have a genuine cap, okay? Check the level, okay? Mine's quite nice. In fact, since I pointed out that there was a little bit of a leakage from the actual water pump, it still does. I can see a tiny bit of pink down there, but it's really not bad at all. Not to the point where I actually notice it dropping, so that's all good. I've got the impression that on the longer journeys it gets so hot, it like the seals, they expand and then they seal themselves, and I think it's only the short journeys where the seals can't expand enough and it starts leaking a bit out the end. I have noticed my new fan belt is starting to make some marks on the pulley. I suspect that's a bit of belt that's actually come off. This is the thing with new belts, they do leave a bit of a residue. Come on, scrape off. I'll get that off later. But yeah, just check your belt for play if you've got either type of belt really. But as I say, mine's worn quite nicely in. You can see a bit of dirt on it since I actually fitted it, which is probably an example of it bending in. It will wear to start off with. I will say that even though I believe my water pump pulley is absolutely fine and the alternator bearing is absolutely fine, I feel that if belts wear quite a bit on the writing very quickly, I'm not saying that mine has this issue, but I've got to be aware about this. But you may have a pulley that's moving, and when you've got a pulley that's moving, it can make the belt wear a bit more. And yeah, that might be an example of possibly that one of my items isn't brilliant, but nevertheless, I don't think there's nothing wrong with this bearing or the water pump as far as I'm aware about. The next check is the obvious one. Please check the wires here because they tend to break, okay? Just make sure they're nice and good and just make sure that the connection is nice and clean. I put a bit of contact cleaner on this side as well, not just the side that goes on. Make sure that that is all nice and clean as well, and that is something I pointed out in an earth video, but it's something to just be aware of. Again, down here, make sure that your earth connection isn't getting all corroded again, because that won't help. Really honestly, check your power steering pump to see if there's any leaks. There will be some leaks around the pulley area because they always do that. They always have a little bit of moisture. Mine does as well. It's always been like that. But just make sure it's not leaking profusively. Also, if you have a 1.4, 1.6, the breather pipe is behind there. Just make sure it's in good condition and there's no evidence that it could be collapsing with a hole or tear, because that will cause one tremendous air leak and your engine will run like a dog. In fact, you may not even get home, it might be so bad. I'll just have a look at these vacuum lines, just make sure there's no holes in them. Believe you me, if this one goes south, that goes to the charcoal canister, you will know about it. You'll have codes and it may run a bit poorly. Again, check the wiring down here to the throttle position sensor, just make sure it's not broken or frayed. The other one is the coil pack just down here. Again, just check the wiring as it goes into the coil pack, okay? Make sure the wiring doesn't fray. I actually have cut the wires of that plug and the coil pack plug off another scrapyard Focus because I believe it's such a problem. I've actually got spares of the plugs, so if that was to ever fray or snap, I can just solder, either repair it or I can solder another one on. It's as simple as that. Just check your connections over here. I think I would lift up the battery and just have a look under here. Okay, make sure it's all nice and clean around the terminals, no battery acid or anything like that. Not really known for that. There's not too many things to actually keep an eye on. Just make sure that's clicked into place. Sometimes it actually doesn't want to click on that side. There we go. You might sure it goes into that groove and it goes down. Now obviously screen wash, you won't probably see any screen wash in there because it disappears into the wing, but just something to top up, because if you can't see it, you don't know how much is there. Sometimes it's a bit of guesswork until you run out. Believe you me, you can go through screen wash quite a lot. Again, just check the reservoir. That brake fluid should be almost clear, it really should be. Just make sure the wiring again is good on this, no problem. Make sure that the earth point that connects from the this bulkhead bit down here, I've put a bit of grease on that, is fully connected and tight. I've just gone over it and checked it again. It is tight because I've known that to vibrate off that bolt. So you just need another bolt and just strap it back on. Again, you know, heat shields, just have a look at the heat shields, make sure there's no cracks around the studs. They can crack around there quite nice and then they start rattling all over the place. That's all good. To be honest with you, as long as you check that there's no rocker cover leaks as well. The other test, not as well as checking rocker covers, because most likely with the Sigma engine, because the engine, if I show you, it's canted backwards, whereas the Zetec 1.82 litre is a flat, it's sitting more flatter in the block, and it sits more closer to the chassis rail. But these engines are canted back for some reason. I would recommend just checking that there's no oil going at the back of the engine. I would also have a look at the camshaft position sensor just here. to see whether it's leaking down the back of the engine. You will have to get a torch and just get your head out the back. The other check, and this is important, is you just take a couple of spots. In fact, take all your leads out, because you're not going to get them confused. They're all different lengths. And just check down there to make sure that there is no oil, and to make sure the core plugs, oh, I can't get my torch in there. Okay, there's a core plug right there. Make sure your core plugs are not leaking, because if they start, see, that one's good as well. That's nice and dry. This is exactly what you want to see, nice and dry. If there's oil in there, it's the rocker cover. The rocker cover from this bank will start leaking into the spark plug wells, and if there's a leak from this bank, it will start leaking down the back of the engine. Just something to be aware of. But overall, nothing, no coolant, no oil whatsoever. Okay, the core plugs are easy enough to change. They really are easy to change, so if they do leak, don't worry about it, but you will have to get the actual rocker cover assembly off. Okay, just check all your leads, make sure they're nice and seated in, just like this. They should be. I know the aftermarket ones don't fit very well, but just make sure they're in. You should have this plastic guide. Some of you may be missing this. It may have been thrown away or lost. I know mechanics tend to lose stuff like this, but just keep it there. It keeps all the plugs nice and taut. Make sure all these are pushed down, make sure they haven't come out, and that's really it. MAF sensor, if you have a MAF sensor, check the wires, because again they're at a point where they're bending a little bit. Just make sure they're not frayed or anything, and then you're good to go. I would also make a quick check of your hoses, just to make sure there's no bulging. I mean, obviously there's a bulge there because that's where the blooming pipe is, where the actual radiator outlet is. Just make sure there's no bulges further up, and make sure it looks good and there's no cracks. I mean, as I say, I've just run this engine, it's nice and warm. This is really nice. It's a cold day today. Just check this hose here, it goes a bit wonky. As I say, again, it will bulge because you've got the outlet there, but as long as it's not bulging halfway down, it's all good. This hose kind of disappears under here, so you've got to sort of have a look around here and just make sure that it's all good. But really, honestly, there's not too much about this. There is a little plastic piece to this heater pipe on the 1.6s, but again, just check your pipe work. You've got some power steering pipes here and there. It should be all good. I wouldn't think that there'd be a problem. These overflow hoses never go wrong. They're under so little pressure. It's not worth checking. Just make sure. There is a check you can do, but it's a bit faffy. Down there, get my camera in. Can you see that? Possibly. You've got the breather hose that I've just spoken about. Check for holes. You've got your valve down there. What I would do every so often, if you can get your hands in there, you may have to just take this the stepper motor, the air control valve, off, just to give it a bit more room. Just get your hand in, take the hose off, because it's not held in by anything, it's not clamped or anything, it's just a bit tight, and you can actually lift with 2 fingers the valve and take it out the block, and just give it a shake. Give it a bit of a shake and a bit of a rattle. If it's rattling, that's perfect. If it's not shaking and it's not free, that ball's not free, that's gummed up. You need to clean that valve out, because that would also cause oil leaks. It would cause excessive pressure in the crankcase, and therefore if the crankcase or vapors are not allowed to dissipate out the engine, the pressure builds up, and that's when you do get oil leaks on all sorts of areas. Believe you me, it's really important to check that. I wouldn't necessarily say check it every time you open the bonnet, but check it once every 6 months, let's say. It shouldn't gum up within 6 months, but just check it. That is really all there is to it, really. That there really isn't a great deal to look at and a great deal to go on, but these are the areas that I look at consistently, because they're the areas that can give you problems in the long term if they're not picked up. So just give all these areas a bit of a glance every time you open the bonnet. Literally what I've just done would probably take 5 minutes when you go through that system, and when you get used to looking at the same things. Obviously don't dismiss other things. If you see any damage, then obviously look at that. There really isn't anything much that you would go wrong with these. I'm not a professional, as I keep saying to a lot of my newer members, I'm not a professional, I'm not a genius. I've learned so much from other people, and there is a video I did recently where I made a complete and utter mistake, and I'm going to correct myself now. In the ignition video, so ignition, spark plugs, coil packs, that video I did, I said that this system that the Focus ran was sequential. I really did believe it was a sequential ignition system. It isn't. I've been corrected very rightly by a subscriber who has been taught more than me and knows more than me. And I think some people may have sussed this already, but the ignition system in a Focus Mark 1 and many Fords of this age is wasted spark. Exactly the same as most cars this age, including my Rover next door. So basically this is it operates on the principle that each plug fires twice on the same rotation of the engine. So one of the fires is doing absolutely nothing. The piston's at the bottom of its stroke and it's firing. It's not doing anything. It's wasted spark. It's a cheaper system. It's more well known. Sequential ignition systems tend to be a little bit more how shall I put it, a bit more high-tech, a bit more expensive. But the telltale sign apparently is the fact that you have on a wasted spark system 3 plugs, because on a sequential system it will be 3 wires I should say. On a sequential it will be 5 wires. You have 1 wire for each individual coil and 1 for the ground. On this you've got 1 for the ground and 2 for 2 individual coils, I believe. So that's the way it works. I am not an electrician. There is something that I need to learn a little bit more of, but it operates on a wasted spark principle, not sequential. So complete correction on that video. You see, I'm not a genius when it comes to these cars. I just know what I know, and I've learned so much from my own subscribers, and I like to correct myself because I really dislike it when I get stuff like that wrong. It's very rare I get stuff wrong like that, but it does happen. And that's me in a nutshell. I am the sum of what I know. You know, I say I'm not a genius. I'm not someone who knows everything there is to know about Mark 1s. There's stuff that I don't know, and I'm learning as I go along. And I hope to meet people at shows where I learn more about their cars, because there is an awful lot I don't know, and the stuff that I don't know about I can't really talk about. It's only the stuff that I know, or I think I know in some of these cases, that I have a little I can share the knowledge as such. But yeah, I don't have stars on my eyes. Yeah, well, that's kind of the way it is, isn't it? Anyway, you take care guys. I will see you soon.